Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Tyler DeSplenter, and I'm very excited to share with all of you the first episode of the Strength Intelligence podcast. On today's episode, I talked to Andrew Pearson. I've known Andrew for about a decade, first as a photographer in the local strength athletic scene, and more recently as my massage therapist. So that means Andrew's part of that team that helps to keep me whole while I pursue my strength athletics career. In the last couple of years, both Andrew and I have suffered pec tears, and we've been able to overcome those and get back to benching our best weights, or in Andrew's case, more than his best. And so on today's episode, I talked to him about rehabilitation, overcoming those injuries, and getting back to bench pressing, from not being able to bench the bar all the way back to, maxing out again. And so if that sounds interesting to you, then I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Andrew, I want you to start with an overview of you.
Okay.
So it's like we can get into your childhood, we can get into your training career, but why don't you tell me about yourself? See, I've only known you for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Off and on.
A while, yeah.
It is a while, yeah. And we could talk about that the first time we met. But I want to know, what's your professional title?
Okay.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
How long have you been training? That kind of stuff. What are your interests in the regards to strength training and rehab?
I'm Andrew Pearson. I'm a registered massage therapist. I've been registered for a little over 3 years. So I got into that because I kept going back to school. I never really found exactly what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a fine arts degree. Then I went back and I started doing math because I wanted to get into engineering. I just wasn't intellectually rewarded with that in the right way. Then I went back for kin. I hated that as well. It just felt like
kinesiology.
Yeah. So I started kinesiology. It just got really depressing talking about neurological disorders. I had no interest in that.
Okay.
Because really, I love sports and athleticism and maximizing human performance.
Yep.
Then I got into massage therapy. And this was cool because it was something that relied all on my skills.
Yep.
And I wasn't relying on somebody else. I wasn't relying on a team. It was my skills and my knowledge were what was going to get results. And the more skilled and knowledgeable I was, it would directly translate to better results.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool as a challenge. And so the way I think of work is it's a challenge, but I'm on a timer. I'm on a timer. I don't have time to leave and come back to it.
Yep.
I'm on a 1 hour time break, so maybe more, but it's 1 hour. And I have to assess, diagnose, figure out what's going on, communicate with you, build a rapport. Then I have to figure out, okay, how can we do something short-term? What's our immediate goals?
Mm-hmm.
What are our long-term goals? How are we going to get from short-term to long-term? What else is going on? How much of a mental impact is there?
Right.
How do we address that? How do I communicate with you in a way that you understand it and that I can improve your understanding? So there's a lot going on that I have to kind of cover in a short time period. And so I really enjoy that challenge of it. And I have to think so much.
Yep.
So that's super fun.
Do you think, I have a question about that for you. You were telling me how your dad was an engineer, and you just said how you went into, or you were thinking about engineering, that kind of domain. Do you think that you inherited any kind of desires like that from your dad? Because
100%.
Basically, I find, what would you say, athletic, medical, doctor kind of treatments and stuff, it's super hard problem solving in a very constrained time frame.
Yeah, I think that's exactly.
So you think that's what excites you?
100%. Because seeing a lot of the similarities, and when I've talked to him about what he enjoys with work, and I was describing my job like that to him, and at first he was kind of whatever, and then once I explained it in that sense of it's really high risk, really high reward. If I fuck up, I could, that could worse. This could be my last chance that this person will ever try to improve.
Yeah.
So I have potentially the next 60 or 70 years of their life, of their quality of life is in my hand.
Yeah.
And this may be the last time that they ever try because they've already been to 20 people and every single person has jerked them around and done nothing and just wasted their time and took their money. So that pressure is on the table too. So and you know what, when I nail it, and cool, this person I have set them up with skills to have good quality of life for the rest of the remainder of their life, versus letting them potentially go downhill and do the opposite. So there's huge risk, huge reward.
Yep.
And it's really strict time constraint. And there's so much skill reliance on not just one type of skill, but your clinical skills are extremely important. But so are how do you educate somebody
Right.
and how do you talk to them? Love it. And now where all of it ties in is like love training. Like the first day I went to the gym, I wanted to know everything I could about it. Like anything and everything. And like from the second I would wake up to the second I would go to bed, I'm learning something about training. I love talking about it. It's like the only thing I get really passionate about is like training and like everything involved with training. So like,
how old were you when you first
I
stepped
think I
in the
must have
gym?
been like, I had like a weight set at home, like, you know, one of those concrete filled ones.
I had one too. Yeah.
I was probably like 10 or 12.
Okay.
And just kind of goofing around with it. But then I started going to a gym probably like maybe 13 or 14.
Yep.
And then it's been like consistent since then. Like I've never taken a week off, even on vacation. Like when we go traveling, before we even decide what we're doing for food or where we're staying, my wife will be looking where we're staying. I'm playing what's the coolest gym I can go to nearby. So that's kind of, our priorities are very different in that sense. We're like, all right, we're going on vacation. Cool. Where am I going to train? And you know what? I'll plan a vacation around going to train somewhere, just to kind of put like, you know, that understanding of like, this is the cool thing. So once I understood that, you know, rehab and how do you take care of yourself is so important for being able to survive training for a long time period, I started reading, like I read stuff from like Kelly Starrett. I read The Supple Leopard, which you got up there.
Yep.
So I read that. I got my first job so I could go start seeing a massage therapist to take care of myself.
Okay.
I remember it bothered me to no end that I had to go to work for a whole week to pay for one appointment. That was an hour. And it drove me mental. And I was like, but this is what this is what I have to do to hurt less and to feel better. And like that kind of started on that whole journey of like understanding the body. But then with training as well, you learn more and you learn like, you know, this is related to this. And, you know, if I improve on this aspect, this will help something else, or that'll help me hurt less.
Do you think training is what led you to your current career?
Yeah.
Because like you've only been doing that 3 years, but you've been training almost 20 years, I assume, probably.
Yeah.
So it's 100%. Like, do you think that lack of knowledge and your drive to it just eventually you're like, I got to do more and more and more and more. And then I got to get hands-on with people. How do I do that? I'll become a massage therapist. Or there's different routes, but you chose that one, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So actually, I was going to go to school for physiotherapy beforehand. I was going to go to Waterloo to go do my my physio schooling because Stuart McGill was there.
Yep.
But then Stu McGill, he stopped teaching. And he just started doing his own private practice stuff. And I was like, I don't want to go to physio anymore. Just because I had been learning so much and I thought so poorly of so many clinicians. And I'd had so many bad run-ins with people and, you know, in the education world, which is its own whole thing that, you know, it can be a mess. So I didn't want to deal with any of that. And I was like, all right, so what's going to be a shorter way to be able to get my hands on time with clients in a clinical, like professional clinical scenario? And all right, physio is 8 years and it's going to cost me this much.
Yep.
I don't want to deal with that. And there's a lot of push back against them. All right, cool. This route. And this route gave me more openings because it has the broadest spectrum or scope of practice out of all clinicians. So that was the coolest thing. So with massage, we have the opportunity to do remedial exercise, which is in our scope of practice, and we can do soft tissue treatment. And our soft tissue treatment, there's no real limitations. Whatever is needed to improve the quality of tissue and the health of the tissue and improve movement patterns and modulate pain. Whatever is required, we're allowed to do it. And so that and any other modality that you can lump into that, we can do. So
it's got like the biggest scope potential for learning, basically, right?
Exactly. So we have the opportunity is so wide and it's such an undefined practice of like massage therapy. What does that mean? That doesn't even Like, what does it even mean?
Well, like how what just so everyone knows, you're one of my team of therapists that I
Yeah.
need. How often do you actually massage my muscles in the last, 5 sessions or something that we've had?
Like, but I find, and with you, for each instance, it's you bring me something specific we have to work on, and it's like, okay, so you have, like, I don't know, you always get tight pecs because you've had a pre-existing pec injury. So like sometimes you have to manage that. Sometimes we have to manage, like, rotator cuff and how,
Forearms, yeah, whatever, right?
And
Yeah.
like, okay, so how do I manage that? Okay, you're a big 300-pound dude. Like, I can only beat you up so much, and like, but you need to move.
Yeah.
So I have to get you moving, right? But like traditional massage, where I just put gel on my hands and I rub your arm, like, we don't do that.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I was getting. Is like,
we don't do that.
You're a registered massage therapist. That's what people in, like, the average person thinks.
Yeah, but that's not.
But
all
it can,
what we do.
and that's what I like you're telling us, is like, it's can be so much more, and
Yeah.
and I think that it should be so much more.
I
Like
think,
what you just said, that mindset. Okay, you just have this problem, and the thing I need to do. I mean, maybe there's some reasons why you would limit scopes for different types of therapists or
Yes.
whatever. But like, the thing you should do is just be the thing that helps it heal or
100%.
optimize the fastest. And that should kind of be like regardless of your scope of practice.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's out of your scope, well then, like, your actually due diligence should be to refer me. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm actually really confident this is what you need for your pec, for example.
Yeah.
But like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't know how, whatever,
So, but I know a guy.
But I know a guy or a girl, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to,
yeah,
like,
100%.
yeah, exactly.
So that's where I think that's something that is a limitation of our field. Is there's such an idea of this is what it is, and people don't look at, like, what is it actually, and what can I do within that.
Yep.
So even like the traditional scope of how massage therapy practices are set up, I don't like, because like we have this ginormous scope, and you know what? Not everybody has to get like basically butt naked on the table and
Right.
covered with draping. There's, what's more comfortable than that? Coming in and keeping all of your clothes on, because you know what? I don't actually have to touch. I can treat you through clothing, and that works really well.
Yep.
And it's really effective too. There's very few times. How many times have you ever had to fully undress?
Never.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
never.
Right?
I've had to take my shirt off, but it's like when necessary, right?
Exactly.
When we get to that part of the session.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, do we actually need to?
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes back to the assessment, and like, okay, I want to have more than one tool at my disposal.
Yeah.
I want to have every tool I possibly can, which would be great, but
Yeah.
I don't. But I always want more. But I want all these tools so that I can address all the problems. Because the most upsetting thing I've ever experienced is having a problem and knowing there's a tool specifically for that,
Mm-hmm.
and then having to do it a much less effective way. Because then I feel morally conflicted, because
Yeah.
I'm wasting, in the way I look at it, I'm wasting your time. If you
you could spend that time getting the optimal treatment.
This is the best thing for what you have going on. This is the best, most specific thing. But instead, I'm going to do this. This is not what I would do, but I have the best thing possible for you. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else. That doesn't make sense to me. So like, let's address that as specifically as possible. And then we can do more. We can build on top of that afterwards. Yep. So with a lot of my stuff, it's we're going to assess, figure out what's going on. So I think that is extremely important. Like, you need your who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Yeah, before you start like manipulating
before you
stuff,
just jump in willy-nilly. And like, you know what? Sometimes that'll give me the answers, because realistically, you live in your body. You're the master of it. You have all the knowledge. You have all the information.
Yep.
Part of my job is to get that information out that you don't know how to articulate.
Yep.
Like with your arm, for instance, I don't know where it hurts, but you can tell me. I can put it in those spots. I can see, what does it feel like? What feedback do we get? Where does it hurt? When does your body tell you, oh, fuck, I'm not going to do anything because that hurts, or because I'm weak? And now how can we take all those signals and use that in a way to get towards your goals?
No, that I like. Well, I keep coming to see you because I love your mindset on this. I think that that's the appropriate one. But it brought up this question right now that I'm thinking. Um, if you just think about all the therapists, clinicians you've seen to help heal your body, how many of them were bad experiences versus good ones? You know, like I'm not saying
I don't
we're not blaming
I
anybody.
don't
We're
have an exact number, but there's
what about
only,
a percentage or something like that?
I would say, maybe 6 or 7% of the clinicians I've seen have been like worth seeing again.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I
Like,
think my guess would be under 10% for
yeah,
myself too, and I've probably been to 50,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah. I
And
feel the same way.
yeah,
So back to like me and why do I think that I'm different or better?
yep,
So I think for an athlete, it's really important to see a clinician that has athletic experience. Because going back to what we were talking about earlier, it takes me 48 hours to prepare for a training session. That sounds fucking crazy. So if you were to say that to anybody else, that's crazy.
yeah,
So now this person doesn't even understand your mindset and mentality and your expectations. They're not going to be able to relate to you and to understand like what is appropriate and what is the
yep,
appropriate advice, what are the appropriate recommendations. So what I can tell you and the information I can give you is very different than grandma. So having the
yeah,
right clinician for your needs is really important. So having competed multiple times in bodybuilding and powerlifting and learning about, you know, raw powerlifting, powerlifting with wraps, traveling around the world to go and compete, or literally traveling to compete
yep,
and traveling to learn from some of the best in the world. It's given me a very different perception and different learning about the entire sport and the demands of high level elite performance and what the expectations are.
yep.
And it carries over from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu to, MMA to powerlifting and bodybuilding and strongman. The same mentality is there regardless of what the sport is. Every single person will do whatever they need to move better in less pain and be strong, like bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah, I describe that as like an athlete mentality or a warrior, you know, like that
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm this much fucked up. Thanks, doc. Just tell me what I need to do. I'm going to get it done because that goal matters
Yeah.
more than anything. And a kind of a summary point on this I have is my experience has been that, and like I haven't been to say like how doctors are educated or physiotherapists. You know, I've had some great ones, but what I think happens is the education is really focused on you from like total dysfunction, say an arm break, something like that,
Mhm.
to normal, and it's like the normal of an average or sometimes even like an elderly expectation, right? Like how do I get you from there to like you can move your arm in a full range of motion, and that's the focus. And then my experience has been I always ask clinicians like, okay, that's not my normal. I get it. That's a
Yeah.
step along the way, right? But my normal is up here where I press 300-pound logs above my
Yeah.
head, right? And so like just being able to move my arm, you know, extend it full range of motion,
Is not good
that's
enough.
not normal, but that's fine. We'll get there. But
Yeah.
when I've asked them, how do I now bridge that gap?
They don't
Most
know.
of them have no idea.
Mhm.
And the kind of response is always go by feel,
What does
which
that
like,
even mean?
okay,
What
yeah,
does that even mean?
sure, exactly. And as someone who thinks deeply about their body, you can kind of go like, okay, like I know my body well. I know what by feel means by from all the training. I know when I've by feel
Yeah.
is too heavy or too light. So like I can figure it out. But I don't think most people can do much with that advice, right? So I actually see there's this gap where there's people like you that you said like you have that athletic experience and that helps you bridge the gap, right? Now, when
Yeah.
I come in as a strongman, you can go like, "Oh, right, we're not thinking normal of the average person
Yeah.
who sits in a desk all
We
day."
need elite performance and we need
Yeah,
elite capacities. And so it's one thing to get to a baseline, which in most cases is very low. And that baseline to like, elite performance, there's a
Oh
huge,
yeah.
huge, ginormous
Like
leap.
I always imagine it, like I'm kind of drawing a scale here with my hands, but if you're like completely dysfunctional and here's your top performance, that norm for those type of
Is
people is
like
like this much of that spectrum,
it's
right?
such subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really like, I don't think that somebody can take you to elite performance if they don't even know what that is and they've never even seen it.
Yep.
If you've never even seen elite performance or what the demands are, like, you're not going to be able to get someone there. Like, and people can argue that all day long, but like,
Yeah.
if you've never felt 600 pounds in your hands and you're like, oh, if I make less than a 1% error, I'm going to be fucked up. Like, and not a little bit, like very bad.
Right.
If you've never experienced that, you can't get someone there.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it doesn't even have to be a specific absolute load. It just means, like, say 600 was your one rep
Difficulty.
max. Have you experienced a deadlift, for example, to that level of difficulty? Maybe it's only 100 pounds for you, whatever.
Yeah.
But like,
Or have
and
you pushed your body
exactly.
to not just where it's difficult, to your absolute breaking point,
Yeah.
and tried to survive? And how do I improve again upon that? That is its own skill, and it takes years to
Yeah,
learn
or
that.
like other, and for more broadly, like, have you ran until your knees hurt and then you still had to run tomorrow?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly,
Like,
right.
if you don't do stuff like
You
that,
don't know.
you know what? There probably is some people who can like sort through it without, but the likelihood that they'll find an optimal solution is probably pretty low, right?
Yeah, good luck.
This brings me to another question here. I think, and maybe you have different answers for like a person just trying to get back to their work or kids or whatever versus like an elite performance.
Right.
I've always found that most medical professionals around like movement and human performance, you get like, 50, some of them it's like 10, 15 minutes with them. And so my question to you is, for somebody, maybe that average person, and contrasting it to elite performance, what do you think is an optimal amount of time you need to spend with these people? And like, obviously the first time could be like way longer, right? Like you talked about where you're going on this trip, it's like a 3-4 hour event, right?
Yeah.
And like in my mind, I think that's necessary, especially for people trying to get to really high levels of performance or who are very dysfunctional. But like you contrast that, it's like you go to the doctor or the average chiropractor, whatever, right? And it's like you spend like 12 minutes with them. And like, I don't even think that's long enough to do diagnostics in a lot of cases, especially if it's a newer patient, you don't know their body and stuff, or a new injury, even on an old patient. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like, if you time was like, no concern, and people could pay you whatever.
If I had like an unlimited time, I would love to do 2 to 3 hours. That would be best case scenario. Now, I think I've only had one person where we were successful using anything under an hour. And this was very niche, very specific. It was somebody who'd been in athletics for more than 40 years.
Okay.
They had done training, they had done coaching, they had taught group classes, and they're an extremely intellectual person. So that was the only time I had ever been able to use a very short time period, and we were working on something super specific. We were able to get directly to the point. And assessment in that area was fairly straightforward, but we started with an hour and a half to figure out as much of the information as we could. And even with that, it still took me probably 8 hours to get some of our lifestyle stuff in check of changing habits. And that was a lot of, interview between appointments. But yeah, 2 to 3 hours would be great. Because like, okay, first off, we have to figure out, is it just that, are you moving poorly? Do we have to improve your movement? Is something not firing? Is there tissue damage? Is something torn? Is something torn off? And okay, maybe that's just looking at direct, like let's say for a shoulder, like, okay, we're checking everything in your rotator cuff. But then what about like, how's your neck? Is there something wrong with your neck? Do you have neck issues? Do you have an impingement where, your neck's not moving? What about your scalenes? Okay, well, like let's check that. All right. Well, we also need to check your ribs. Are your ribs moving? Or do you have compression? Do you have an issue there? Do you have a rib that's displaced? We need to check all of that. Then, okay, let's say, does your shoulder blade actually move properly?
Yeah.
Do you know how to get it in the right position? Okay, well, like let's see if we can get you to put it in the right position and now do everything. Does that feel better? So there's a lot to go on with that. And there's a lot of education. I think that you got to be real good to do that even in an hour.
Yeah.
So the more time you have, and what if it's somebody who's not a super intellectual and you need to explain it a couple different ways and reposition it differently? So there's a lot of obstacles like that.
I think we neglect the communication aspect a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes, especially for someone you're just meeting, it's just
difficult.
like, I'd probably recommend like you just talk to them for an hour, because like there are injury history and things that you
Mhm.
need to know.
Mhm.
But I feel like people's personality are going to affect their ability to be compliant with whatever you assign.
Yep.
And by just talking to them like as a human, right? Not as this like box that you need to manipulate.
Yeah.
You're going to learn things about that. Like you can talk to them about their goals. It's like, what if they tell you they have none? And then you're just like, okay, so that's a drastically different person than say like myself, who I have like
I need to put 300. What was it? What was that log press? Was it
350 I've done, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I need to put 350 pounds from the floor over my head in probably the hardest press possible. Okay, that's very different.
Yeah.
So trying to hash that out, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm glad you had that kind of thought process too, which was like, let's take our time with it.
Mhm.
Now I know like it comes with financial considerations, right? If like you charge $100 an hour and I need 3 hours of your time, it's like I have to have a good job just to be able to like have your help, kind of thing.
And
right?
I find kind of with where I've gotten, more and more people are at a point where they've seen multiple clinicians and they're not getting it, and they're not getting, they're not being educated about their body. They're not being educated. Your shoulder blade's in the wrong position. Nobody says that. People don't say that or be like, oh, I always do this exercise. Well, don't fucking do that. It's a stupid one. Do this instead.
Right.
Nobody says that.
Yeah.
So I think having those conversations is so important, and it takes a lot of time to do that and build the rapport and build the trust. But even to have, the guts to actually say that stuff of like, don't do that.
Right.
Like that's, how many times have you been to somebody and they're like, don't do that, do this instead. They'll just say, oh, well, don't lift weights.
Yep, that's the general response.
Great,
right?
awesome, thank you. Well, too bad that's not an option.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, what am I going to do instead? So, but I found more and more so that now I'm having people, because they've been through that whole gamut of, little bit of progress, no progress, little bit of progress, no progress, regression, re-injury.
Yep.
And so they're at the point where now they're like, what do I have to do? And so I haven't yet tried to tell somebody, hey, we need to do 2 or 3 hours. But I think a lot of people would be more open to that, because they're getting to the point where they're like, cool, we get some results. But I've even had strategies for that as well, too. So since I took the muscle testing courses, there's a lot of stuff from the neurological level that will make you think you're in pain, but you're not actually. And it's just that things are weak and you're scared of it. And so I'll do things that will just build that trust, where I can show somebody, we'll do some muscle testing and be like, look, this doesn't fire. And we'll get it to fire. And they're like, holy crap. And just from there, that kind of breaks the ice, and they just kind of trust me a little bit more right off the hop.
Yep.
So I find even stuff like that is really, really important. Now, is that necessarily a thing where like, cool, that is the clinical, the best thing to do? Maybe. But did it help develop that rapport so that we have trust to progress, or to show that, hey, I'm doing something different, or that you can have your buy-in?
Yep.
Awesome. Now, there's a lot of ways people could think about that. Sometimes people that, what, I'm just doing this and they're going to trust me so I can sell them on something. Some people might do that. But here we're at the point of, look, we can make progress. We can make a change right now. Cool. We can do that. There's a lot of hope for you.
Right. I think too, of all the times we've talked about, you're kind of hinting at it here, there needs to be time for educating about the movement.
Yeah.
And the best therapists I've had, yourself included, would be, you can usually just tell me exercises and I already know them. right? So you save some time there, but
Yeah.
that's not going to be a lot of people.
But-
Or if they're like a variance of certain ways you want me to do it.
Now, what if, though, for instance, let's say I was treating 3 different strongmen. All you guys are similar shape, similar size, similar strength, but it's different. So you may need specifics. Someone else may need very different specifics, but the movement could look exactly the same. So there's a lot of stuff like that it's it's difficult to do that.
And
like
that's what I'm saying. It takes time. That is time of your set. Like that has to fit in that hour you get as well, right? Where it's like
hard.
You're teaching the motion pattern, right?
Yes.
And like saying like, yeah, that looks good, but like you said, are you thinking about firing this muscle
Right.
or holding this joint while you move
Right.
that one? And like, I think we neglect that because I've been to therapists who are just like, just do this exercise, right? They don't show you the exercise. They don't give you a resource to go look it up, which like, you could now with video.
Yeah.
There's like, videos of everything,
But
right?
even like the most simple one, everybody who ever watches this, anyone you've ever talked to has all been given, oh, your pecs are tight, you get numbness in your hands, do a door stretch.
Yeah. I actually talked to somebody recently that they said that was their recommended warm-up.
And so the way the body works is it's kind of like a guy wire system. So we have tension all over, or it's guy wire, tensegrity, same kind of thing. There's tension. You can never eliminate the tension in your body because then you just crumple and fall apart.
Right.
So we have to have the tension. All you can do is you can change the tension around. You change it front to back. You can change it from one side of the system to the other. It's like changing the middle point of like a lever system.
Yeah.
There's still weight on it, but we need to change the balance. So you're doing your pec stretch. You can't get rid of the tension here. There has to be tension in your shoulders. Okay, so what if, well, this is ready to blow your mind. Instead of just trying to take the tension out of your chest, which you can't do, what if we try and take the tension and then squeeze your back at the same time? So you're decreasing in one area and you're increasing in the other. Whoa.
This is some voodoo shit, I think.
Isn't that wild though? But so every time I show somebody that, I'm like, cool, did they tell you what to do with your back? Everybody gives me this weird look. I'm like, yeah, you squeeze your back at the same time. You're doing both things because we have too much tension in a shortened pattern. And we can't tell it to lengthen without something else taking up that slack. All right, so we can't just have a lengthened muscle here and a lengthened on the opposite. It doesn't work like that.
And I think people don't get that concept, which is why they're missing, I think, some of the point of therapies. So, for example, someone could come in with tight pecs. Instead of saying any of that, what you just said, you could just massage their pecs.
Yeah.
It will loosen some tension. They will feel better. Maybe their pain will go away or lessen or whatever. And they think like that was the cure. But as soon as like what they go to sleep or whatever, and then they wake up, it's just right back, right? It's because like actually the resting tension is imbalanced, right? From like, and that's from your, scapula muscles and your pecs, right? They're like, and so, but that isn't talked about. And in my experience, even just like nobody said things like that. Like, I don't think I've had too many therapists talk about like balancing the tension on a joint.
No.
For example, right? Like it's like, no, or same with a chiropractor, they can manipulate your bone structure. It will, what would I say? Almost like trick or command your nervous system to relax,
which can be really effective. I have seen awesome
that's
things,
right. Yep.
And that's part of like your whole healthcare system. Like there's a time and place for that.
Yep.
There's a time and place for strengthening. There is actually a time and place for stretching. It's not very often, but we do need that sometimes. And so what I try and do is figure out what do we actually need at this time and how do we apply that correctly in a way that's going to get results in a short time period, which is that's the real battle,
Yep. And that's what makes it such a hard problem. And I think hopefully people will be able to hear this and understand that like I always think about therapy is ultimately self-driven. And it's like the therapist is kind of like, on the outside guiding, right? Yeah, they can manipulate you and stuff like that, but ultimately, like, movements, they're going to be the cure, most likely.
Yeah.
Or at some point. And then it's like, you're responsible for that.
Well,
you can't move me like all day, every day, right? You don't replace my muscles. That's what I have to do.
We'll throw a little bit of a different spin on this. Okay, like let's say with like chronic shoulder injury, most common things other than lower backs, you did something to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do? Okay, what if we didn't do that? What if we did something differently? People don't talk about that. How did you actually get to pain? How did you get injured? How did you develop this movement dysfunction? What are you doing wrong? And what can we do to improve that?
Yep.
And now, instead of doing something 10% wrong 100 times a day, let's say it's not wrong, or it's even 1% off. Let's improve those movements that led you to that issue. And there's a lot involved with that. Sometimes it's movement training, sometimes it's strengthening. A lot of the time it's changing, giving you the capacity to move, because we have to treat things as well too, where like with your shoulder, we've been times where we can't get into the positions we need to be. We just straight up can't get there. So first I have to give you the capacity to get there.
Yeah.
Then we've got to load the tissue, and then we've got to be able to remember the pattern to use it. Because if I just tell you to go and, do something properly, but you're like, well, I can't.
Right.
Well, then, telling you to do it and showing you how to do it is useless.
Yeah.
So first we gotta get you there. Then, there's that process of it. Like, we have to get you there. Then you have to be able to, use it. Then you have to be able to strengthen it and then maintain it and then use it repetitively.
I think I want to touch on one point you brought up, which is like very profound. I think the first kind of people I've heard talk about it, one was Kelly Starrett a long time ago, and maybe Brian Carroll is another one.
Yeah.
But the first thing you do is remove the thing that's causing you the problem.
Yeah.
Right? So if walking, like, I'll use my dad as an example. His like hips and knees are messed up from working in a factory on concrete floors all day.
Right.
And when he has like vacations and stuff, then he doesn't walk with his cane. It's like, right? But he has to work and, so whatever. But that just illustrates the concept that, like, what's the first thing you should do? Well, you find out what's the causes.
Yeah.
And remove them. And like, I know that's easier said than done. Sometimes you can't fully remove them or remove them at all. And but that's where you have to, like,
how do we mitigate it?
Yeah. How do you work around it intelligently?
Yeah.
But I think people go to a therapist, you help them feel better, and nothing is done about the cause of it, right? Yeah. And then that's why they're in pain again, right? Yeah.
Well, and I see it so I treat a variety. So I treat in a clinic where it's all like, more so Gen Pop. They're all like unionized members. So there are a lot of hyper repetitive movements.
Okay.
And, with each sector, the same injuries. In a different sector, they're all the same injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? It's because they're all doing the same movements, but they're all doing them poorly.
Yep.
No one talks about, like, hey, do you know how to put on your shoes? Or do you know how to sit down on a chair properly? No one talks. It sounds so goofy.
Yeah.
For someone to be like, you're not putting your shoes on right. Let me show you how to put your shoes on so that it doesn't hurt. Or I'm going to make sure that you can sit down on your chair. Or let's make sure that, your chair is actually set up properly. Do you even know how to set your chair? How should your lumbar support be set? What should you do?
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about those things because they're not very exciting. They're kind of, well, unless it's me. I think they're exciting.
You're right. They're not exciting generally.
They're kind of dull things.
Yep.
And we don't really get overly excited about those, but those are so important, of those every single day things, doing them better and smarter, even if you're a little bit slower, but on the sense that, I'm preserving my body.
Yep.
Because I think so often we shortchange and we sell it. We don't count our body as having any value, and we just kind of disregard it to get whatever outside thing done.
Yep.
When, my internal is really important. And I think prioritizing that for everybody is prioritizing, how do we do everything, and particularly the things that don't feel good, how do you do them, is going to be one of our biggest things for rehab and long-term ability to train.
I agree. Yep. Okay. Sorry. Finish your thought.
Think about this. Okay. How much time have we both spent talking about benching just in our right? And like our overall lifetime of training experience. We spent a long time talking about technique for benching. We've talked a lot about, deadlifting and all these big lifts.
Yep.
But like, we don't talk about like, do you know how to walk?
Right.
What do you do when you walk?
Show me how you sit in the chair. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
How do you? We don't talk about that, but
Yep.
we do that a lot more than we do these other things.
For sure.
Right?
Yep.
So I think we gotta prioritizing that a little bit, and just a little bit of thought. It's not that I need to be, be the best in the world at it, unless you have something that forces you to be.
Yep.
So it's
I hear you. Those are probably like, say someone's in pain, right? They sit all day. I bet modifications to how you sit, your desk setup and stuff,
really important.
could make like a massive difference, even versus like whatever exercise you want them to do, right?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to do some studies like that.
Speaking on that one, I actually had a client who was over COVID. They were working from home. I don't know why, but they did not want to buy a new chair. Refused to. So they sat on a bar stool at their kitchen counter. They sat at this bar
leaned over.
Yes. Yeah. They sat at this, and there was no back support. There was no foot support. They sat at this fucking stool, and it was like there wasn't even padding on it. It was just flat wood.
Okay.
Probably the worst possible situation. And they're like, my back hurts. Well, yeah, your back fucking hurts. Like you're sitting curled up like a croissant, and like you shouldn't be sitting like that.
Right.
And I was nagging them, buy it. We'll get you a medical note so you can write off. Buy this because you are in pain. You have imaging. You can write this off. I hadn't seen them, and they came back in. I was like, they're not in for like 8 months. What happened? Like they changed something. They got pissed off with me telling them this. Like, what happened? They came in and they're like, oh, you were right.
I bought the chair. Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm always right. Like,
right.
Of course, what'd you do? And they're like, oh, well, I went and I got a desk. So I stopped working at the counter. And so it's a sit to stand desk, so to adjust height. And they're like, yeah, and I got a good chair that has lumbar support, and I got a footrest. And I was like, why didn't you listen to me sooner? And they're like, well, it was expensive. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Your back hurts.
right.
Like, pick one.
Yeah,
like, do you want your back hurt, or do you want to, spend a little bit of money? Like, but think about this. Okay, if you had a dollar value, you could put on your back pain or your elbow. If you had a dollar value, and let's say it was something as simple as $1,500. $1,500, and it's gone. Would you take that?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, $1,500 is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Let's say, with for back injury. You've had a back injury, your back has hurt for, 30 years. Say it's only $10,000.
Yeah.
That's it. $10,000 and it's gone. Would you do that, or would you be like, that's a little expensive? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So when you put it in those perspectives, it's a pretty easy decision, I think, for most people.
It sounds kind of silly.
Right.
You can spend these things, do these things, do it right. You'll improve. But then you got to, sometimes it's as simple as you just have to buy these things.
Right.
But then sometimes, okay, you spend the money, you learn, do it. Sometimes it's that easy.
Yep. Especially, that's a great perspective. And I think people, they maybe get caught up on, like, for example, if you told someone they had to do this exercise every day, multiple times a day for the rest of their life to get rid of this pain.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high cost for some people, right?
Yeah, it is.
But if for a lot of people, something like a new chair or changing your posture or things that help you change your posture, that's pretty cheap, and you can get like probably a pretty great return on your investment, right?
Yeah.
Like there's lots of people who are having those kind of chronic pains who maybe can't work or do the work they want to do.
Yeah.
Or get wages that they want to do. Whereas it's like, yeah, hey, just buy these things, right? And then if you add that with the movement care,
you're golden.
You'll probably feel pretty good, right?
Yeah. So I like to try and like break things down. I try to think about things from a different perspective than how most people do. And you get some pretty cool answers like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's change gears here. I want to talk to you about bench pressing specifically.
Cool. Yeah, my favorite lift.
It is, okay.
Yeah, by far.
So first I want to know, you said you started training around, 12 or so, around there at home, 13, 14, you get to the gym. was bench press the first exercise you ever did?
No, it was probably like push-ups or crunches.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I actually was terrible at bench. I had no idea how to do it.
So the first time you did bench, then tell us
terrible.
like what was the weight on the bar? Like,
it was probably like, I can't even remember what those bars weighed, but it was probably only
was it like the 1 inch?
the aluminum ones that don't even weigh anything. So
right.
it was probably only like 30 or 40 pounds.
Yep.
It's probably something like that. And my shoulders hurt like crazy. So it was not love at first sight.
So so it was kind of like painful and shitty experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kept you coming back then? Like to bench press specifically.
So it actually took me a long time to really like it. At first I was like, oh, squatting is great. I've got really short femurs, so I don't have to move very far. I'm like, awesome, easy. But bench didn't come along till later when I had, I'd been traveling a lot, seeing a lot of powerlifting stuff. And like, there was something like, I saw a lot of people deadlifting where there's just like, very skinny, gangly looking guys where it's like, they would deadlift something huge. And I didn't think that was impressive. And it was like, cool. But then you're actually like, you had good leverages, but you're actually weak. So it was really a weird thing where it's like, okay, you don't look like you work out, but then you lifted, like a 600-pound sumo deadlift. And it's like, cool, that's 600 pounds. But you also didn't look the part. Like it's not impressive to me in that sense. And I was like, so I got this kind of idea in my head that you can be somebody who's not very athletic and not actually strong, but you can max out your leverages. I was like, well, that's kind of lame. But then like I saw the same thing with squatting as well too. Some people, they're just like, you could see a skinny guy would squat something bigger, big fat guy, he's just got a big belly and he bounces off of it. And then as soon as I saw bench, I was like, you can't really there's no way you have to put in the work. You can't just be lucky and just be lucky to be good at it. You have to put in the work. You have to do everything. And everybody has the capacity to get better at it. And then now with equipment and everything too, we have benches, the lowest lift that's been recorded in powerlifting and the highest lift as well. So it's another one where you have extremely high rewards for improving your skill and precision, which is, I love that. And the nuance and the mastery of it is really cool. But it was I didn't really get into it till kind of maybe like 23 or 24. But what really kind of sparked really enjoying it was I went to back to rehab. So I went to a seminar with Chris Duffin, and he was talking about treatment and shockwave and peptides. And I had what I didn't realize was an old tricep injury from when I was really young. And my elbow just always hurt. It always hurt. And so I finally did treatment on it. And I was like, oh my God, it doesn't hurt. So I was like, I can actually bench now because my tricep doesn't hurt all the time. And a friend who's a powerlifter, she said, you're always trying to bring up your upper body. So why don't you just get a bigger bench? And she said to me, put 150 pounds plus on your bench, your upper body will get a lot bigger.
Right.
And I said, well, how does that work? And she said, well, all of the work you have to do to get that 150 pounds extra, that'll make you bigger. And
it's out of necessity.
Yeah. And she's like, there's no way around it. If you want to get a bigger bench, you have to become a bigger person.
Yep.
You have to get stronger. You have to get better coordination. You have to build up every muscle in your back, everything in your rotator cuff, your hands even. Everything's got to get tougher. I was like, okay, cool. So then I started doing that. And I was like, it's the realizing how much of the technical and the patterning is so important that it's like most people don't actually, they just have no idea how to do it. It's not that they're weak. They just have no idea what they're doing. And so that's been so cool to see that your technical changes make an even bigger difference here. And it's been super fun with that. And all the training modulation and stuff has been really fun. Then I got into not just equipped, but unlimited, which is like, that's the most fun thing I've ever done in training.
Before you get into that, just back up. So you said around 23, 24.
Yeah.
That's when you start to get into it. What would your bench press have been around then?
Oh, it was pretty shit. It was like maybe like 245, like 255. So I don't think I hit my first like 315 bench press till I must have been like 27 or so was the first time I hit like 315, which is not that great.
Right. Okay.
So it took me, I was not a naturally gifted strength athlete by any means whatsoever. So it took me quite a while to develop that and like the confidence. And I remember, oh man, missing 300-pound bench presses and during the COVID gym times, like countless times. So
Yep.
yeah, so it
Okay.
was yeah, I was not gifted at that by any means.
Well, that's okay though, because it makes for a good story about how you can become very good at it. Like, because um, I have the same mentality as you. You say 350 pound bench, and the thought is that's not good. If you look at if you
Yeah.
compare across the population,
It's great.
it's really good.
Yeah.
But you know that satisfied athletes suck, right? So it's if you
Yeah. There's
it's
always
kind of
something to get better at.
oh right, exactly. So I'm trying to put this in the time frame because I looked this up when you and I met was January 2016.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember
we did
you came
that
to
photo shoot, right?
yeah that
Yeah.
photo shoot,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Way back.
And you've definitely put on a lot of upper body size from there.
Yeah.
So was it around then when you were starting to get into the bench, or was it after that time period?
It was kind of around COVID, but then like
Oh, okay.
maybe
Yep.
so
A
maybe
few years later.
yeah,
Then.
it was when I started to get more into it. But then like I would say probably I think 2022 was really like that was that kind of like tipping point when like all right, I started taking my profession more seriously.
Yep.
I took care of my elbow injury that I didn't really know was there, and it was just
Yep.
something was funky. I managed that, and then this friend of mine told me, increase the bench. That will bring up your whole upper body. And I was like, okay, cool.
Okay, so that makes sense. From that time, I knew you 2016 to 2022. You were bodybuilding near the start of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'd done a couple shows then.
And then how did you do in that? Did you win anything? How did it feel for you? Like, did you like it? You didn't like it?
I kind of enjoyed it, but I didn't at the same time. Like I like looking shredded and stuff, but
Sure.
it was like, well, that's cool. But I was never the biggest guy, right? I was always like,
Mm.
okay, cool. I'm super lean. I've got really big legs, but like, my legs would be so disproportionate compared to the rest of my body.
Yeah, why I'm asking is to see if did that lack of upper body size from your viewpoint kind of help fuel your desire to be a bigger bencher,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. I think that was a big part of it. And like there's something about it of like just the raw strength and like prowess of it.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's something about that that was different than, just being super lean or something. That there was like this totally different like appeal to it. And there's a different, I don't know, I think there's a very different like aesthetic look to it. Like seeing somebody like, I know I'll never look like Julius Maddox, but you see Julius Maddox or like Ryan Kennelly in person and it's like, what the fuck is that? In comparison to like seeing somebody like, even compared to seeing like, Big Ramy or even like Phil Heath, Jay Cutler, they're impressive.
Yeah.
But it's completely different. Completely different. Like you see, like Julius Maddox walks in a room, every single person in there turns and looks, and they're like, "What the fuck is that?"
Mm.
Whereas like Phil Heath could put on a sweater and disappears, even though he's as freaky as he is. There's something, and there's just something different about that, and it's like it's just different. More people get the understanding and the respect of a big bench press than anything else. And I find more people can talk in those terms and everybody can understand it because it's less so, oh, you just have great genetics for building muscles. Cool, great, awesome. There's something different about that, and just the way that it's perceived.
I think something about it that plays a role is like, for some reason, and I'm not sure yet why, most people end up doing a bench press when they go to a gym.
Yeah.
Even if they don't pursue athletics or anything, it just seems like this natural, like, because people ask you,
what's your bench?
So then you're like, oh, I better like try it out. I better, if I don't do good, I better make sure I don't say anything. But
I could be wrong, but I think historically it was the first power lift. Even before, I couldn't say if it was before deadlift or not, but one of the first, what they used to do for a bench press was they would actually do a full neck bridge. And they would start, and they would actually pull over and then
press,
with their neck on the ground
which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, so they were doing that well before there was ever like an actual like bench, way before a squat, of course. Like squat was the last one that was introduced. So I think there's even just something that there's something kind of like it's a different emotional state you have to be in to bench press than you do to deadlift. I think because a deadlift, you can just be like, whatever, let go of it.
Yeah. If
And
you let go, you lose your life maybe on a
yeah,
bench.
and
Yeah.
like
Teeth. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and like a squat, you can bail on it, but a bench press, you can see it.
Yeah. You have to watch it.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it like this. Just a lot of weight,
Yep.
and you can see it, and like you see it coming down towards you. And I think there's just something different about that, and like you can see that you can see yourself throw it into the air. Like you can, there's something different.
Yep.
It's yeah, I don't know. It's just different.
Okay. So after bodybuilding, you did did you do full power meets before? Because I know now you're focused on bench,
Yeah,
but like,
I
did you do
prepped
full
for a
power?
bunch of them. Every single one got canceled. I actually had 6 or 7 meets in a row get canceled within 2 weeks
Oh
beforehand.
wow. Was that like during COVID stuff?
COVID
Oh
times,
yeah.
and so I was so sick and fed up with it, and I was just over it. And then I also like I just don't really care for raw lifting either. It's not as I don't really enjoy it as much.
Yep.
And so I had a monolift over COVID.
Right.
It was a famous one in the province that had been bought and sold, and has a lot of history. There's been tens of thousands of squats. So
Where did it go to now?
So the guys from Apex bought it off.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Apex in Burlington, they have it. So they use that there for some of their meets.
Nice.
So it still moves back and forth.
Yeah, that's good.
It's interesting. There's a lot of history with that one, but I sold that because we closed the COVID gym.
Yep.
And then from there, I was like, I don't want to squat anymore. I don't give a shit. And I don't really like squatting's fun, but I don't get the same enjoyment out of it. And it's like, if I'm gonna, build my legs, I'm gonna use a belt squat. Like I'm gonna do something, or a leg press. Like I'm gonna do those because they're different.
Yeah.
And I feel that they're a better thing for like overall leg development.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't really enjoy that as much.
I think that I wish people could find and go through that experience you just described, where unless your athletic goal is to do something that requires you to squat or whatever, any given motion, don't do it if you don't like it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, you said, okay, I still have this desire to build my legs in a certain way. It doesn't have to be squats.
Yeah.
And depending on what you want your legs to do, there might be way better things you can do than a squat, right? And I just wish, I have so many conversations with people now that I go to this gym in town here, especially like, hey, can you look at this movement I'm doing? And it's like, I try to always ask these people, the first thing is like, do you need to be doing this movement? Like, do you like it? Mm-hmm. Or are you just doing it because like you're following some program or your friend does it or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, like, did you ask yourself that question? Like, is this movement for me? And why do I always tell them is because if it isn't fun anymore, it just becomes a hassle.
Then don't do
you
it.
Start to hate it. Then you start to hate the gym. And then you don't go to the gym, and then you don't get healthy or meet your goals anyways, what you want to do, right?
All from thinking, well, I have to do this exercise.
That's right, yeah.
And like, even as much as like, I like benching, there's like 10,000 different variations of bench you can do.
Yep.
And like, you don't have to bench your chest. You can do this. You can do that. You can bench to boards. You can bench to blocks. Like, I don't care. They're all fun. But you can change them. And now, like, I still do squat. Like, I just don't like squatting with a barbell. So I'll use an SSB.
Right.
Or like, I'll do it. I had one the other day where I did it with the chain handles on an SSB.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't care to max out the squat. It's just I wanted something fun and challenging to do.
Yep.
So that was its own hardness. And like squatting to a box now and like changing your box height. And it's like, it doesn't have to just be a free squat because it has to be a free squat. Right. Like, and it's not like, it depends what are you using it for, right?
Yep, exactly. And I think that that's the kind of point I'm trying to say is I did it for a long time too.
Yep.
It's like, I'm a power lifter, whatever that means. And power lifters do these movements kind of like regardless.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Though. So it's funny you mentioned that. I have a couple of friends that have like 2,800 pound totals. And one of them, I was asking him about that. And he says, yeah, he only squats once a month.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, why do you do that? And he's like, well, when you squat like 900 pounds for reps, you're going to be pretty fucked up. I was like, oh, okay. So what do you do in between? He's like, oh, leg press, hamstring curls, sled. And he said to me, those are the ones that actually build those muscles.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he's like, the squat is just an expression of the strength and coordination and neurological skill that you have developed.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. So you don't really need to do it a lot. And he's like, no. He says he only does it just to display the strength and
Yep.
that specific skill. And I was like, oh, so you really don't need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like this epiphany moment. I was like, oh, cool. Okay. I don't like it. And if it's not in gear, I'm not interested.
Yeah, exactly. And I just find this is an even more important point for like the general population, because if you dread going, like if your goal is I want to be leaner or healthier, whatever it is, pick my kids up, and the things like, it takes a very mentally strong person to go there every day and do the stuff that you absolutely hate doing, right?
Yeah.
And even the strongest people probably, if not given enough years, would quit, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, I don't know, that's just my mindset, and that's why I talk to people about that. Like, does we should focus on the goal and what you actually need out of life,
Yeah.
not just doing or another one is like Bulgarian split squats. They suck. People don't like to do them. Yeah, don't do them. Like, do something that's like enjoyable.
It's weird. That one's even turned into an internet meme, and
Right.
I just think so. Like, okay, well, you first off, you don't know how to do them.
Yep.
You're not
Exactly.
even doing them right. Well,
Yep.
like, that's your problem.
Right.
And like, secondly, why don't you think about like what they'll give you instead of just being like, oh, it's hard. You know what is also really hard? Being weak. Like, so you could have
pick which one you want,
like,
right? Yeah.
weak and in pain, and like there's great uses for it.
Yep.
But then again, there's also like reasons why not to. So yeah, I think really like back with training and treatment and life, like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yep.
What is your goal? And is this modality going to get you there effectively, or could you pick something else that's going to be more effective for your time investment?
Right. Well, that's a good segue. So going back to your, like, let's get to the start of your year taking bench seriously.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have, how many meets did you do, or did you do any before your pec tear? Because I really want to get into your
okay. So
pec tear.
I hadn't actually done any prior to my pec tear. I had prepped for them, and then I would just do like the meet would always get canceled, so I did like mock.
But were those bench only?
No, those are full power.
What about like? So I'm trying to understand now. You don't want to do full power.
Yeah.
You want to train your bench and get it better.
Yeah.
Before your pec tear, did you have a contest in mind?
Yeah, so I was actually in prep for one, and I think I was like 6 or 8 weeks out, and I tore my pec, and I was like, so what happened was I was doing singles there, and I had just slightly misgrooved one, and it came off my chest, and I flared just that little bit. I got kind of nervous of the weight.
Yep.
And I had flared just a little bit, and I was like, you know what? I'm strong enough. I can fix this. And like, I flared, and I just went to throw it, and it moved, but I just felt like crunch, crunch, crunch in my pec, and it was like, all right, I'm done. And yeah, so it was just like, I should have just called for a spotter, but I was like, I'm fine. I'm strong enough. I can move through this. And I was, but I was strong enough to, start ripping the muscle in half, which, not ideal.
Yeah.
But so I was still going to go do the meet anyways. And I was just going to, take whatever I could do, just, rehab it as aggressively as I could. I wrote a whole article about that with, peptide shockwave rehab.
Is that the one that's on Elite FTS now?
Yeah.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. And so it's a lot of rehab. Like, and I went from the first day doing push-ups against the wall, and I could only move about a quarter inch, to doing them every hour on the hour, doing push-ups against the wall, to eventually being able to do them, move full range, then eventually going down to the ground. And so when I was doing them on the ground, I couldn't actually lift myself up. So I would start and I would lower myself down and then drop when I couldn't control it anymore. And then I would roll over and I'd have to like get back up and then do another one like that, just doing that negative to be able to move through that range with load.
So did you compete at that meet? That was 8 weeks later?
So no, unfortunately. So I was going to, but then I had a family member who's very, very sick with liver cancer. And so he had passed away like a couple of days before that meet. And I was like, well, I'm going there. Like, I'm not going to compete. And then this is kind of ironic. When I got there, my aunt was like, why are you here? And she's like, and I was like,
don't you have a meet? Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, yeah, my uncle just died. Like, I'm supposed to be here. And she's like, oh, he really enjoyed watching your videos. I was like, well, I didn't know any of this. You guys didn't say anything. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, like, he would have wanted you to compete. And I'm like, well, I'm here. So,
yeah. Well, you can get in the next one, right?
Pardon?
I mean, you can get to the next contest, right?
Yeah, there's always other ones, right? And I was like, family stuff always comes first. Like, that's not negotiable.
Yep.
I also learned that I have a cousin that competes in powerlifting as
cool.
well, too. And competes as like a 165er with like a 700-pound deadlift.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, that's interesting. He's good at deadlifting. He's a little shorter than me, but like terrible at benching. So I was like, I'm still the best Pearson bench presser.
Nice.
But then, so then I did an unlimited meet soon after that in down in Nashville, and that was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, right. And at that meet, you bench 525, was it?
Yeah,
your
525. Yeah.
When that was with like a Widowmaker, some kind of like
a single ply one. So
a single ply, yeah,
it was a lot of fun. So it was American powerlifting is completely different than Canadian powerlifting. Right. Yeah. It was even though it wasn't like there's some big lifts. Like there was a guy who at least he didn't bench it, but he loaded like mid-8s on the bar. There's at least 1,000-pound squat. The coolest thing was there was I think he was a 181. It was 181 that totaled 2,100.
Nice.
So like it was pretty impressive to see that, and like that was pretty cool. So but yeah, man, it's the busiest meet I've ever been to, where it was so freaking packed that the spectators had spilled out into the warm-up room. It was that packed. It was
that's unreal. Pretty cool because I'm sure you've been to meets around here, and
nothing.
Honestly, my recommendation has been to my family because I've done powerlifting and strongman. Every powerlifting meet after the first one, I was just like,
don't go.
Yeah, it's not entertaining. Like you're not going to enjoy yourself. So I
got something pretty funny about that. So my wife, she's only been to 2 meets with me.
Okay.
One, I was working at it, photographing it like 10 years ago, and there's like a university gymnasium. It was terrible, awful, horrible lighting. It was so boring. She was like 30, maybe like 200-300 feet away, and she had no idea what was going on. The next meet she went to is the WPO finals at the Olympia.
Oh, nice.
And so she went to one, then she got to see like all-time world record squats. She got to see like multiple 1,000-pound bench presses, which is like, have you ever even seen a 1,000-pound bench press?
Not in person, no. Yeah.
So she's seen multiple of them now. She got to see a 1,200-pound squat. She got to see a 220 guy squat an all-time world record 1135.
Wow.
So she got to see that stuff, and now like her perception of like what powerlifting is so skewed. She's like, oh, there's this lame meet where there's a bunch of like little skinny kids and they're all like crying, and then it was like this one, and it was like, this is like completely different world. So she got to see that. But yeah, I agree, a lot of the time it's not very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's very it can be such a fun sport, but I think at the same time it's made very bland in that sense. But yeah, so at the meet, a friend of mine drove from Georgia to come and handle me. So it was like a 6-hour drive. And I was just, hey man, I'll be there. Like, if you guys want to coordinate something, would love to see you guys. It's been like 5 or 6 years. And so, yeah, he just, packed up all of his shit, got in the truck and like drove all day to come down and like hang out and handle for the meet. And it was a blast.
I think, isn't that, okay, my experience has been that's one of the best parts of strength sports is the community, right? Yeah. Like that person who doesn't owe you anything, right, drove that far to help you have like maximize your performance, right?
Yeah, and just came out and just hung out for the day, and like we ate food.
Yeah,
we all went and squatted the next day, and like it was so fun. And I made for so I competed in a meet. And then the next day went and go maxed out a squat in the gym the next day. So that was it was awesome. And it was like we showed up and I was like, guys, I haven't been in briefs in a long time. Like it's been like 4 or 5 years. And they're like, yeah, we got some that'll work for you. Try these on.
Nice.
And like they smushed me into these other guys' briefs, and I was like, all right, whatever. And like loaded up like near my max ever squat, plus chains, plus this. And like I was like, it took me like 30 seconds to unrack it. I still moved it. It was not a good squat, but man, that was the most I've ever felt on the top of my back at the top of the lift.
Yep.
So like right after, heaviest bench ever. And I was like, sick, this was fun.
Well, that's
So
good though.
it was a crazy weekend.
But that's great that you got to end on such a high note. So let me rewind it a bit. I want to know the day of your pec tear, what's your 1 rep max on bench, or estimated?
So I probably would have had like low fours that day, and
Okay.
I tore it out like 385.
Yep.
And so that was either late September, early October, and then mid January I benched 525.
Mid January.
So
okay, yeah. So you
October,
got like
November, December. So like less than 16 weeks later after tearing it, went from tearing it to not being able to take my clothes off or not even being able to do a push up against the wall to a 525 bench.
Got it. Okay. So now I really want you, since your whole world here is like rehab and strength training, I want you to walk me through the weeks and tell me like what was your approach, and like maybe later we can talk about a general approach. But
Okay.
so it's like week 1, your pec is torn.
Yeah.
You know that for sure. What do you do week 1? Because I know obviously you want to get back to this meet. So that's the idea, right?
So week 1, the first thing I had to do was determine like what exactly happened.
Mhm.
And it was, okay, how bad is it? How severe is it? Do I have to get surgery? So that was my first thing.
So what'd you do for that? Did you go to doctors? Did you get imaging?
I just went, I did all the assessment myself. I wanted to see
Yep.
where could I move? Could I at least apply a slight amount of strength? And my thought was, if I don't see any improvements within 48 hours, I'm going right to the hospital.
Mhm.
So I did assessments, see what could I move? Could I move passively? So I got my hand, it took me a lot of effort, but I got my hand up against the wall and I just moved around through some range of motion to see what do I have for range without pain. So I had okay range. It wasn't perfect, of course.
Mhm.
Had started swelling up, had already had some bruising and stuff. But I could move it. That was my big thing. I could move it. It was still attached. It hadn't rolled up. My pain was not great, but I could move. So that was the big thing. So I wanted to assess, see where am I at? Is this like catastrophic, or is it just like this sucks?
Okay, so that was like the first,
That was
couple
my
of days.
That was my first day,
Yeah.
and then the first day I literally started treatment right then and there. So I went home from the gym, basically cried in the shower. While I was in the shower, I had already made peptides and had them ready on the in the fridge. So as soon as I got out of the shower, I put peptides in my pack and started treating it right then and there. So thankfully, I do have my own shockwave machine, so I could start shockwaving my pack.
So you started shockwave?
Literally right away. So I put peptides in it, and then I shockwaved it, and then I just got it moving.
Mhm.
So really what I was trying to do is I wanted to get as much blood flow and nutrients into the tissue as I possibly could, because if you don't have those, you're not going to be able to recover.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to do is, okay, so I have to rebuild back to being able to do my bench press movement and to have full range of motion on my pec. So I had to start training those patterns. Push-ups were my best one. The other one I couldn't do at first was like a dip. Getting out of my computer chair was just, I couldn't use my hands.
Okay, yeah.
So what I did was I actually did isometrics there. So I started with my my computer chair, set the handles as low as I could, and I would just push on them. And then eventually I started leaning forwards to push on it a little bit more. And this was all in the first week.
Yep.
So I was doing range of motion stuff all day, pretty much like as often as I could, some sort of range of motion, a little bit of like just very, very, very light loading. I went back to the gym, I think less than a week later. And so I got my hands on the bar. I just moved it and I wanted to see where can I go to comfortably and safely without pain.
You mean in the bench press pattern? Yep.
Yeah, I didn't get up very heavy. But so I just wanted to move it, just get that patterning back, get rid of that fear. And it really just kind of progressed along that way. It was super smooth. I had no hiccups except for when we went on vacation. So we went on vacation after I had torn it, and I was like, well, I have a meet coming up, so I had to train. So I trained and I got a little too excited, and the downside of rehabbing when you're in meet prep and with supplements and stuff, I had a huge amount of strength, and I'm a really explosive lifter. So explosiveness is very, very, very bad for injuries. So when you're explosive, like when you're rehabbing something, you are not allowed to be explosive.
Yep.
And so I was accidentally a little bit more explosive than I thought. And I thought I had tore it again. But it was just that I moved quicker than I expected. My body was like, fuck you, don't do that again. So I learned that one. But it was really, you have to be really, really incremental with your improvements. Whereas, like, did I have the strength to go bench 400? Yeah, absolutely. Was my tissue going to let me? Not a chance. So I had to scale back and treat my training. If I was benching 135, I had to treat it as if I only had the capacity for a 135 bench, which was really hard to do. So I was injured and I had a lot more strength than I could display at the time.
Yep.
So I had to scale everything back. I had to intentionally move slower,
Yep.
but still get the tissue moving, get it going through full range. Because when you are injured, you want to make sure that tissue can still move rather than immobilizing it. Because with immobilization, you get poorer healing. Just overall, the tissue quality, what comes back is not very good. If I were to have left it immobile for 6 weeks. And I couldn't take time off work either. I couldn't afford to take the time off work. So I had to go back to work. I had 1 day off of work, and then it was like, deal with it, figure it out.
Yep.
So yeah, so I had to get back there.
So when was the time when you, like, how far out from that injury to where you got under the bar? Even just the barbell, I mean, like, no weight.
I think less than a week.
Yep. Okay.
It was, I wanted to get back to the meet. So that's why I had so much in terms of the peptide supplementation, everything in check, and the shockwave. Now at around a week, I added in a TENS unit. So
Okay.
I bought like the top of the line compacts. And so I was using that, and I was so terrified to use this thing because each time my pec contracted with it, I thought it was going to tear off. So I had to really be careful with it, and like I had to position myself safely and all sorts of stuff just to get used to it. But that was the TENS is actually huge for being able to reduce the pain and the sensitivity.
Yep.
Because really, what it did was it just made my pec contract thousands of times.
Yep.
But in a really low intensity that eventually reduced pain. At first, like the lowest setting on it hurt so bad. But then eventually, as it was going, it was like, oh, this is safe. My body, kind of helped me break down that fear of it. So I started using the TENS every other day in combination with training, because this was going to, twitch it a little bit more aggressively than I was comfortable with doing it, but it would do it, and my body would get used to that to safely just teach me that, all right, it is safe. It's going to, contract safely without tearing off.
Got it.
And then, so that was one part, and then loading it was a different one. So I had to do that, and it just kind of kept progressing. Obviously I did more volume than strength. I hadn't gotten back to any like proper speed work until about 2 weeks ago, because speed work was one I was still pretty scared to do, of just, trying to move something as fast and aggressively as I possibly could. Kind of scared me. So I hadn't gotten back to that, and that felt pretty good recently, but off topic.
So back then end of the week 1, you're like under the bar.
Yeah.
Now, for those next few weeks, what are the movement patterns? What are the exercises you're doing? Obviously, I'm assuming some of it is under the bar, right? You want to maintain that because you have the meet coming up.
Yeah.
But what else are you doing? You said push-ups was one against the wall.
Yeah, push-ups against the wall.
So what are other rehab exercises for your pec?
For this, I was doing really, really, really light pullovers. Most of them at first was doing just like mimicking a dumbbell pullover.
Laying down pullover.
Yeah. But I couldn't load it at first, so I did it. First, it was literally just my hand.
Just your
Then I did it with a water bottle. Then I switched over to a 5-pound weight. So I did slowly progress that as I could do it with comfort and low pain.
Yep.
That was the key, was low pain. There's going to be some, but I didn't want it to be like, ouch, fuck, this is bad. I wanted to just be a little uncomfortable. And then we kind of progressed from there.
So pullovers,
that I did. My favorite one was actually reverse band dips. So I set up in one of the assisted dip machines. I used that plus a reverse band, because the top here when I'm lengthened was fine, but as I was stretching, that's where I was getting a lot of the discomfort. So, all right, well, how do I? This range is good, this range is not. All right, cool, reverse band. So I was doing them with a green reverse band on it, and like 100 pounds.
Yep.
So I did that. I did a lot of flies, but I would set up the flies in a way where I had a really strict range of motion, where I could only go to a certain point that was definitely pain-free. And then I progressively increased that as I could without, obviously, with low or no pain. So it was push-ups. Then I had the flies, I had the reverse band dips, and I had some bench. But then
pullovers,
yeah. And so I had to do those. This was all just trying to bring back my tissue health and get it to recover.
Yep.
But then, okay, like my back's fine, my triceps are fine. So I had to still train those really hard. And trying to find that was kind of a little bit more finicky because I couldn't do pull-ups.
Right.
I couldn't do pull-ups or pull-downs because this stress, when you're in that overhead position, as much as you think it's your back, your pec and your pec minor are stabilizing that. So when you go to pull down, no matter how good your coordination is, you're going to contract your pec to get the stability of the shoulder. So I had to change that. So I could only do low angle pulling movements. Eventually I was able to get to like a horizontal pull, but everything else was kind of a lower angle at first.
Yep.
A lot of rear delts, but I couldn't go back all the way because it hurt the back.
Right.
So I had to use train as many of those other things and find exercises that worked without bothering things. So I couldn't do a push down for life of me. Tricep push down was so painful. I couldn't do those. So I ended up actually doing, it's kind of funky. So I just had a band between my elbows holding them together and do like overhead tricep extensions.
Okay. Yep.
I did some dumbbell rollbacks as well because I could kind of set those up in a safe manner because I still needed to train my triceps really heavy because they're strong, but I can't bench. So finding movements where I could do that and that were comfortable with my movement limitations was really challenging to think about.
Yep.
So yeah, I still had to train all those things on top.
I think that's a good. Why I wanted to ask you about that is, I think it's sometimes, for people in different scenarios, that could have been totally different. Like you had a meet, which means you had to keep training other things. Yeah. Now, if you don't have a meet, I think then like you might still want to train those things. You still might have done the same thing. Yeah. But I wanted to make the distinction that like you wouldn't have had to. Yeah. Right. You could have focused more on healing the pec up first and then like bringing the other stuff back up.
Well, I felt that it was really important to still keep and maximize that strength because just because my pec was suboptimal, it doesn't mean that I can't still improve the strength in other areas. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll just be more of a tricep dominant bencher anyways. So I changed my technique a little bit at that time to be a little bit more tricep engagement anyways, and less so about pushing straight through, but more so pushing out and like loading my pinkies in the bar so that I was having more tricep initiation rather than being like a pec dominant bencher. Yep. Just trying to work around that and like, okay, my strengths and weaknesses have changed. So now my pec is not a strength. It's absolutely a weakness. So how do I mitigate that in bigger triceps? So of course I got to hammer my triceps, train them, get them strong, and then utilize them effectively in the lift as well to mitigate the trauma on my pec.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. So you just like, you adapt as your body breaks down, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I've been through my fair share of adaptations.
Yeah, because your weakest link will always be changing. Sometimes you can bring your weakest link up and awesome, great. But sometimes something may drop back down, right? So we need to figure out how do you address them to bring up everything, and whatever your biggest strength is at that time, how are you going to maximize that?
Well, that we don't have to get into this, but I think that's what fascinates me about strongman. How do you get good at like 1,000 variations that you might?
It's
we'll
cool.
save that for another day.
That one's wild.
Okay, just to summarize here, what I want to understand is, I'm trying to lay out in my mind this timeline you're on because I went through a similar thing. Right. So it's like week 1, you're under the bar. Yeah. How many weeks past your pec tear are you at? Say 1 plate, 2 plates. When did you get back to 315? Rough idea there.
I think it took me at least, I don't think I hit 315 by the time the meet had happened.
That first one that got canceled?
Yeah, that first one.
So that was 8 weeks or so
out?
I
don't think I did. I think I had maybe gotten up to like 275, 285.
So when was 1 plate though?
I think 1 plate was within the first like 10 days.
Okay. So pretty quick, yeah.
But it was not full range. Not at all. I got to, at first, I couldn't do a full range rep even with the bar. So I was doing about half reps.
When did you get a full range with 1 plate?
probably 2 or 3 weeks
Okay.
where I could get there comfortably without a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
lot of
Things
pain.
aren't aggravated. Yeah.
Probably about 2 or 3 weeks is what it took for that.
Right.
So I was alternating doing some partial range of motion where I was going to, where do I start to feel the discomfort? And I would stop just a teeny bit short of that. So I wanted to go as close to it as I could with control, of course, and then transition out of it with a little bit with control there, because I wanted to develop that control and safety before it was starting to become uncomfortable. So I wanted to be on the edge of it, because if you're on the edge of it, you're still going to develop that strength and resilience with a couple of degrees of range of motion difference.
Right.
So I wanted to stay within that as much as I could, and still, how do I capitalize or at least maintain as much of the strength as I can, and then still try and train the full range of motion of the tissue as well.
Yep, makes sense.
But yeah, I don't think I hit a full 315 bench until maybe 8 or 9, maybe even like 10 weeks later.
10 weeks.
But then at that point, I'd already said, okay, well, I'm not doing this meet. Well, fuck it. I'm just going to, get in the shirt instead, because I already had a bench shirt and I had the Widowmaker, and I was like, fuck it. I'm going to use these. These are way more fun anyways. And I'm really strong at the top, but it's just, I'm more delicate at the bottom. So, okay, so the Widowmaker will help me.
Yeah, of course, right.
And I was like, you know what? In the meantime, it'll make my back a lot stronger. Cool. So kind of made that transition. Once I realized I can't do the meet, we'll switch and we'll pivot and we'll do this instead.
Okay. So yeah, 2 or 3 weeks, you're hitting a full range, 1 plate bench.
Yep.
What about 2 plates?
2 plates came pretty soon after that.
Yeah, another week or two.
Yeah.
And then
2 weeks
you
later.
said 3 plates was about maybe 10 weeks out from your injury.
Yeah, that was quite a bit longer to get to.
What did you get up to raw or estimated raw? Maybe you didn't do it before that meet where you bench 525.
I don't actually know the heaviest I got up to raw, because I didn't really go a whole lot heavier than like 315. But I did get up to a set of 12, like close grip with 315.
Okay.
So I felt for me at that point, because I was doing my goal was not to have the heaviest raw bench at the time, but I needed to learn the equipment more so and get used to that.
Yep.
Because I felt like, okay, if I'm handling high 4s and 500s, how much benefit is this lighter stuff at 315 really going to do?
Yep.
So I felt it was more important to learn that equipment. Since then, since that meet, the most I've done raw, I think, was only like 355, like close grip on a floor press. So my raw strength has still not come back to that point, but I haven't been trying to push it.
And so we're maybe 6 months since your tear?
Yeah, ish. But I haven't been trying to push that raw aspect at all. And so it's within relativity.
But like you're approaching it regardless, even though you haven't been pushing it.
Yeah.
You said you're a bench it, you'd probably get around low 4s the day you tore your pec. 355, that's pretty close.
Yeah, like a close grip axle press on a floor is hard. So So I mean, like that's part coming back, even though it's not really like I haven't really been crazy pushing those numbers either. I'm still like, all right, okay, I start getting past like 300s, like, all right, I'll, gotta dial it in a little bit more, but I'm not like, okay, I need to, max out my raw bench, where I'm like,
yeah, of course. Now you've like changed your goal, right? It's like, let's get into this equipment and like maximize that, right? Yeah. And that makes sense. I'm just trying to kind of put the timeline into perspective, because I think that's what people kind of miss is like how long these things how short they can be, but also how long they can take. And because that if you went to the doctor after your pec tear and like, what's their answer going to be? One answer would be like, well, you're never going to bench again, right? Or just stop benching.
Yeah.
And no one's really going to know, but their best guess would be like, I don't know, months, years, right?
So,
I've heard lines like this before.
Yeah. So realistically, I think like when you have something like this, I feel like you're most of the time, like within 12 weeks, you'll be able to be training in some sort of like a competent manner.
We're talking partial tear too, right?
Yeah. This is
obviously a full rupture would be a lot different story.
There's one story in particular. It was Travis Rogers. He tore both of his quads off.
Okay.
His was 11 weeks till he competed. From full quad rupture and reconstruction, 12 weeks, but 12 weeks is like exceptionally good.
Yeah. That's,
so in the relativity, I would expect, most people post some sort of injury. There's some moderate training capacity by that 10 to 12 week mark.
Yep.
I think that would be a really safe guideline.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are going to beat that, absolutely, but it depends. Your level of rehab and the consistency is so important to get those exceptional
Yeah, it's what you
results.
put into it, right?
Absolutely.
If you're like rehab, and I'm saying that all the way up to your maximum performance, if that's all your rehab, if that is your life for those 10 weeks,
You're
you
gonna
probably
get
get
really
pretty
far.
good, right?
Yep.
But if it's just something you do once a week,
Yeah, right.
right? So it's about, yeah, you're right. It's how much you dedicate
So I
to
thought
it.
I kind of broke it down like this too. So normally when you go and train, you might spend maybe 5 minutes under the bar moving. Okay, well, that's five minutes once a week.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably doing like 5 minutes, like 5 to 10 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that total amount of like volume
Yep.
of tissue movement, and low stress, low intensity, high frequency movement was insane. So I went from maybe doing 10 times as much movement per day, which is like ridiculous if you think about that. So I was doing 70 times as much movement per week as I would have been normally, like previously.
Right.
That's a lot of like tissue loading.
Yep.
So I think that helps. But yeah, so I mean, back under the bar, doing some like moderate low pain movement, maybe at like 25% within the first like 2 to 3 weeks. Then like 6 to 8 weeks is probably around 50 to 70%.
Yep.
And then getting from that 50 to 70% is when it starts to dramatically slow down in terms of progress.
Yeah, right. It takes time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I wanted to hear that because I had a similar experience with my pec tear. Mine was also partial.
Yeah.
But I had 5 weeks until my meet.
Oh, that's a tight line.
And I went from, not benching the bar to, I think it was 310.
Okay.
Was my last warm up in the meet behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's like a pretty good progress. It was like 5 weeks, right? I went from 0 to 310 pounds. Now I bombed out because 310 felt great, so I opened at 330, and that was too much. Like the bar came to my chest. I felt the whole pec just turn into a knot, and I just said take it, right? Yeah. And I chose to bomb out. But that's why I wanted to compare that between what your experience was.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people don't realize how short it can be if you put that work in, right? Well, like you can get back to 310. I think my best in competition raw is 391.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's like 80% or something like that. So in 5 weeks, I could get back to 80%, right? Yeah.
So I think a big part of it was also like, how do you think about it too? Because there's really two ways you can think about like injuries, and it's, wow, I'm busted. This sucks. I'm going to be like this forever, versus, okay, this is a challenge. I'm in a new state now. Like everything is progress. Oh, cool. I didn't do that yesterday, but I can do it today. So there's those two mindsets. And I see it time and time again in the clinic as well too. People that have this positive mindset of, okay, I didn't do this yesterday, and today I did it, but it was hard. Tomorrow will be better. Mm-hmm. Versus, wow, I couldn't do that yesterday. I can't do that. So there's those two different like perceptions of it. And one, you're going to be able to progress so much faster. Whereas the other, people can let themselves be indefinitely stuck.
Yeah. And it's all just with what you put in your brain, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then also like with this one, we got to like reel ourselves in and realize like, don't get too greedy.
You have to be honest.
Yeah. Like, okay, I tore my pec, and this was like, this could have been something where I had to go in surgery and be, could be seriously messed up. So respect that and say, okay, I hit a PR, which today, the first day might've been my PR was, I put a quarter on the bar and I moved it. Cool. That's my PR. That's awesome. Great. That's the best I've ever done.
Yeah.
And then, the next time was, okay, maybe I moved it for a couple more reps. Maybe I moved it for, put a little bit more weight on it. Awesome. That's my best ever.
Yeah.
That's the best I've ever done.
Right.
And so each time I think that was a really important thing to do, rather than looking at, oh, well, I have done this, or so changing that mindset.
Change the target, right?
Yeah. And think, okay, I'm now in a new state, new body. I have a torn pec. So I had a bad pec tear, but this is the best I've done since then.
Yep.
and just move forwards one step at a time and treat it like that. Like you're not going to go, okay, cool, I PR'd, I hit 100 pounds. Next week I'm going to put 275 on. Like that's not that is too big of a jump. That
Right.
is not
And it's all
logical.
just because, well, I used to do 4. So, right.
That's not logical. Well, all I did was 100 pounds. So what can I make progress of off of 100 pounds within reason? Whereas like if you were to tell that a novice lifter who's very new and they just hit their 100-pound PR, you're not going to load that big of a jump on them. Now, okay, being elite with supplements, with everything else and training and the muscle mass, maybe you can push a little bit more than that. So it's very important to do that, but not get like too greedy.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to scale that. And then I think I probably could have done better if I trained more often. So if I had like 2 or 3 like low volume days or not low volume, but like lower loading.
Yep.
And then maybe one day where I kind of pushed that a little bit in different manners, maybe that would have worked better. I don't know.
Okay. Well, this is a good place I'd like to end here is, kind of this idea, if it happened again, what would you do? Or like, what's kind of a general guidance here? So say, someone comes into your clinic and they tore their pec. What would you advise them to do as like general things here? I know not specifics because you actually have to assess the person and it's going to be different, but interested to hear what you say like on a general and especially highlight, is there anything that when you went through it now you would change looking back?
Oh man, that's actually, I got to think about this one to make it really good. So I think some of the big things I would do is just make sure that you learn how to move pain in low pain or pain free. Do that as much as you possibly can. And then I think just pull out every single stop, do every single thing you possibly can. Don't get caught up in like heat therapies. I don't think that they're very effective for this. I think they're a waste of money and a waste of your time. But I think movement, whatever you can budget for additional treatments and modalities, use every single one.
What would be your top to go to on those?
Shockwave, 100%. 100% I would do shockwave. TENS can be really effective as well too. Those would be like my top 2 modalities to spend money on. I would not spend money on anything else. If you can afford PRP, do that right away. Only if you can afford it. Cause I mean, like that's a huge hit. Like I was not at the point where I was going to go spend like $4,000 and fly to Cabo to go and get a treatment done.
Right.
But if that's within the budget, do it right away.
Yep.
No questions asked. And then do not skimp out on your peptides or supplementation for it. Like make sure you have all of your stuff, like your vitamin A, your vitamin D, like you want to have like the calcium, you want to have zinc, you want like collagen, you want magnesium, manganese, copper, like all of those things. Make sure you have all of them in place and like have a really good multivitamin in. Because if you're deficient in those minerals that are your building blocks of your new tissue, how are you going to build? Right. How are you going to accelerate your new tissue growth?
Right. Yeah.
So supplementing with collagen and like not 5 grams, like I mean like 60 grams a day of collagen. What are you going to need to recover? Use a lot of that stuff. Use a lot of that. Make sure you're sleeping well and like keep moving. I think those are real, like ultimately your big things.
Right.
And if you're not doing those, you're just being kind of negligent of like your progress, and you're taking that away from your future self, which is ridiculous.
Makes sense. And then finally, like, what kind of timeline would you lay out for somebody in terms of expectations?
I like to err on like the conservative side.
Yep.
And I always say our best case scenario is probably something like this, maybe 12 weeks to be at 80%.
Yep.
And worst case, if you don't do this, maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
So we want to, and ideally we want to do as much as we can, so it's as short as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, I think like with this type of thing, the muscle is traumatized and slightly damaged as opposed to torn off the bone. Yeah, 2 to 3 months. You'll be back training, you'll be moving. It may not be comfortable yet, but 2 to 3 months, like you should be in a good spot, or you've been negligent or something else is worse.
Right. And then all of this will be tempered by how compliant are you as a
Yeah.
patient, right?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
how much work are you doing? Like, we were talking about 7 days a week, multiple times a day. That's
Yep.
what I did. I had
Yep.
used the term non-negotiables.
Yep.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, I have these two exercises. For me at the start, it was isometric lying chest flies.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd switch the angle, obviously starting
Yeah.
closer in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
moving out.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then very high repetition dumbbell lying bench press.
Okay.
Those were
Interesting.
my two non-negotiables. I
Yep.
did a bunch of other stuff, but that stuff I had to do every day.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
twice a day on the days I trained other stuff.
Okay. That
So I had to
makes
do it
total
as a
sense.
warm-up, and I had to do it some other time during the day. But yeah, if you put that kind of work in, obviously you're gonna shorten that.
Well, I think a really important thing is post-injury. It's important to think that now the way we think about this is important, but the idea that if I do not do these rehab things, I will never get back to normal. If I do not do them, my chances of getting back to normal are 0. Now, if I do them, it's not guaranteed I'll get back to normal.
Yep.
But you want to bolster your chances as much as you can. It would be very foolish to say I want to choose to be fucked up when you have the opportunity not to be.
Right.
The same thing goes when someone's going for surgery. They're getting a hip replacement. Cool, you're getting a hip replacement a year. Start your rehab now, so that when you get there, instead of taking 4 to 6 weeks to be able to walk ish, you'll probably be walking in a lot less pain within 24 to 48 hours, which sounds crazy, but I've seen it.
Right.
So
yeah. Movement, at least in my experience, movement seems to be the cure. It's just about the guidance you get and how you go about it, right?
Dialing it in appropriately and scaling back, and like not having an ego. Like not having an ego is really important. Otherwise, you'll definitely hurt yourself again.
That's I think hard for everybody to manage. It's hard to leave it at the door when you walk in the gym, but I think that's probably one of the most important things, whether you're injured or not injured too, is learning how to check your ego.
Yeah, there's a time and place.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Well, let's end it there.
Cool. All right,
thanks for chatting with me today, and
cool.
let's go train.
Yeah, get some food in.
All right.
Cool, man.